Hello, folks, and thanks to everyone who's attended our workshop on looking at the bigger picture when it comes to your problem and getting to those root causes. We're going to touch on a lot of different things here and share a few different models. We're going to also share the importance of market research, which we're going to get into a lot more depth for in our next workshop at 3 p.m. But yeah, I'm really it's going to be, I think, something which is really important when you work in the environmental field, especially when you have so many different problems that are so intersectional. Here, I'll kind of just give expectations for what we'll be doing in the workshop. I want to like do a little bit of a get to know you. I might pause the recording for that particular part after maybe Amanda and I introduce ourselves. And then we'll also understand the importance of digging into a problem. I'll show a little video which kind of shows an example of how if you don't kind of address the root causes of your problem or actually do sufficient research, you might end up causing a whole bunch of ripple effects and end up creating even more problems in trying to address the initial problem you started off with. I'm going to introduce there through that just the lens of intersectionality. And really, we're going to introduce that lens through these different, we'll have a bit of a discussion around the video and then share a couple of frameworks where we're going to really highlight different ways that one can think about their problem and not just the problem itself, but all these different things around the problem which really impact both kind of how that problem manifests, but also how different solutions can really make a difference in that space. I think we're going to have a Q&A period and make a push to recommend folks to join our market research. I know I was chatting with at our team making session, a couple folks there. So I know there's at least one group that's like been trying to figure out this market research question, and it very much connects with this workshop here. So yeah, excited to dig into some of this stuff. So we're gonna some introductions. Maybe Amanda, how about you and I can do introductions first, and then we'll pause the recording here and allow for our other participants to share. And if they feel comfortable and want to share in a public setting, that's also cool. So Amanda, do you want to start us off here? And
Yeah.
introduction, say your name, where you're signing from, and feeling on a scale from 1 to 10. And what is the project, if for the participants especially, what is the project you're working on? What kind of research have you done so far? Feel free, Amanda, to even share about some of the cool projects that you're doing and some of the cool innovations that you're leading, because you've got a very cool background there as well.
Hey. Yes, thanks, Chatengshu. So my name is Amanda Tanner. I am working with YIC for a bit, just to support in branding or just different things here and there. So it's been really, really fun so far. And I am signing on from Montreal. So I've been working remotely. Today I'm at a 9, like I feel pretty good. It's really sunny, so I'm really excited to be outside later. And then the projects I'm working on, so I have a few projects, as you mentioned. My first one that takes up most of my time is TAP. It's my own little startup. We are trying to help educators connect anonymously with resources that they need for their mental health, for their students' mental health, whatever it is they need at any given time to make sure that their experience in the classroom is helpful, and so that their lifestyle is changing, because right now our educators are burnt out. I can go on about that project, but then yeah, otherwise I also study psychology and I'm working with psychologists on social media management. So I like to make sure that their information is digestible for like the average reader like myself. Yeah, then I do other things, but I'm not, we'll share later. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Amanda. And it must be such a valuable part of the team at YC. So YC, just kind of very high level, it stands for Youth Impact Challenge. It's an organization based in Turtle Island, or what we now call Canada, which kind of has this core mission of helping young people turn their ideas into action. This is where we get super excited by folks like you who are doing this incredible projects that are looking to make social and or environmental impact. And we do that through a few different things. We've got a summer competition, especially for Canadian-based innovators, and we've also got this more international climate change challenge that we've partnered with organizations like the Oath Project and EarthNet with. And so yeah, it's been very cool to see just an incredible team in Amanda, Arpita, John from the Oath Project just coming together to make this possible, and then all these incredible youth from I'll literally I think it's 32 plus countries now that have registered, people youth from 30 plus countries that have registered. So it's crazy to see people all across the world being involved. In terms of like how I am, or I guess my name, Shatang Sharoy, I'm signing from the unceded ancestral territories of the Mi'kmaq here in Chipuktuk, which is kind of translates to the Great Harbor in Mi'kmaqi. And it's kind of colonially known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm feeling, it was interesting. I thought that I would be very droggy today because I woke up that's very, very early to do the team making session for folks on the eastern side of the world, just to kind of coordinate better with their time zones. And I've been awake for quite a while here, but honestly, I feel like really energized. Like I'm really excited to be sharing some of this stuff. But even like through that teammate session, just like it's a reminder of just how inspiring youth can be. We had a wonderful discussion around environmental racism. When I say wonderful, it was like a very difficult discussion as well, and that was at one of our evening workshops, and it ended up being like a hour and a half discussion that was supposed to be like a half hour, but it was just because we were reflecting on like different experiences and just like reflecting on the fact and actually connecting with this particular workshop, you know, things, all the environmental work we do, things, it kind of exists in this broader system of, there's economic systems, capitalism, such a big kind of thing that needs to be considered in all these equations. There's colonial systems that are still in place, and we still see things like racism, it manifests in different ways, and so I guess part of the idea with this particular workshop is actually to get into like those root causes of you've got the problem, but then you've got all these sub problems or related problems that you think about as well. And in terms of projects I've been working on, maybe I'll share a bit about EarthNet. So EarthNet's the platform for the Oath Project, which is an youth-led eco nonprofit, is co-building with some folks in BC, and our goal is to bring together a community of climate action stakeholders and create a directory of kind of what's going on in the space. In terms of the research we've done, it's been a lot of different things, and it's still something, it's a project that's constantly evolving. But yeah, I mean, lots of stakeholder interviews, and that was really key. It was like actually having hour-long conversations with different stakeholders to be like, what is it that you might actually need, and where is the problem? But then also like everything from surveys, everything from like just doing a ton of research into what is the various systems that we are operating in. There's all these technologies as well that we need to contend with, and how do we kind of fit in this space and make a positive impact in this space, not just an impact, but actually a positive impact. So yeah, so that's a little bit of me. I'm really excited to hear some of the other folks here. And so I'll pause the recording and then we'll restart it when we get into our content for the video purposes. We're resuming the recording, folks. And yeah, we're going to showcase a video that's going to get into and I want to, as you watch this video, just ask yourselves, there was a problem that this video is going to highlight. It's based on a true story in Borneo, where the folks in Borneo were having issues with malaria. But I want you to think about how sort of problems kind of cascaded when we weren't thinking through the full context. What would happen if we implement a particular solution in a situation? So yeah, let's check it out. Again, think about the broader system and how is it that different factors come into play when you want to manifest a solution and ensure that it might be successful or fully understand your problem. So here you go, folks. And if you have any issues with hearing the recording, just unmute yourselves and let me know, or hearing the video here.
In the 1950s, the Dayak people of Borneo, an island in Southeast Asia, were suffering from an outbreak of malaria, so they called the World Health Organization for help. The World Health Organization had a ready-made solution, which was to spray copious amounts of DDT around the island. With the application of DDT, the mosquitoes that carried the malaria were knocked down, and so was the malaria. There were some interesting side effects though. The first was that the roofs of people's houses began to collapse on their heads. Turns out the DDT not only killed off the malaria-carrying mosquitoes, but it also killed a species of parasitic wasp that had controlled a population of thatch-eating caterpillars. Thatch being what the roofs of the Dayak people's homes were made from. Without the wasps, the caterpillars multiplied and flourished and began munching their way through the villagers' roofs. That was just the beginning. The DDT affected a lot of the island's other insects, which were eaten by the resident population of small lizards called geckos. The biological half-life of DDT is around 8 years, so animals like geckos do not metabolize it very fast. It stays in their system for a long time. Over time, the geckos began to accumulate pretty high levels of DDT, and while they tolerated the DDT fairly well, the island's resident cats, which dined on the geckos, did not. The cats ate the geckos, and the DDT contained in the geckos killed the cats. With the cats gone, the island's population of rats came out to play. We all know what happens when rats multiply and flourish. Pretty soon the Dayak people were back on the phone to the World Health Organization, only this time it wasn't malaria that was the problem. It was the plague and the destruction of their grain stores, both of which were caused by the overpopulation of rats. This time though, the World Health Organization didn't have a ready-made solution and had to invent one. What did they do? They decided to parachute live cats into Borneo. Operation Cat Drop occurred courtesy of the Royal Air Force and eventually stabilized the situation.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and consider becoming a patron by making a pledge of $1 or more for each new video we create. Thank you to our patrons. We cannot make these videos without you, and thank you for watching.
Yeah, crazy in a way. Just like how things are so interrelated, right? You don't even think that, what do mosquitoes have to do with me building my house? So any reflections, and in particular, what what do you think about when you reflect? How do you reflect on the intersectionality lens when you watch the video, and how might you apply some things? Swastik, I see you had your hand raised. What are any reflections on your end?
Right. So basically, like WHO have made a solution, but it failed or it lacks somewhere in pilot testing. Pilot testing is a term where like you have to test on small area before implementing on the larger side.
Yeah.
So somehow I feel that it lacks of the pilot testing, because every solution don't work everywhere. So that's the reason they lack to the solution, I can say.
I think that's a great point. And actually, one of the importance of pilot testing is to think about what are the potential side effects, because there might be things you even think about. And so if you spray all of Borneo with DDT, then that's really, really troublesome, And so like, how do you think about that is very important. I also really liked your point there around and not every solution will work everywhere, right? Because everywhere has slightly different environmental factors, and if you want to know if your solution is going to work in this place, you need to know about the factors behind this place.
I was going to say something similar in terms of how I felt like the people who came up with the solution, they really thought about their own people instead of the people that they're building it for. So understanding your users is a really big thing when it comes to finding solutions. Otherwise, you're just causing a bigger problem.
I love that. Okay, and Matt, I feel like I'd love to hear what you think about that, especially because that's exactly what you get so passionate about, is make sure you understand your users. What are your reflections there, my friend?
Yeah, I really like what you said, Olive, and Swastik as well. I think like the last question there, like it says simple questions require complex reflection. And I think that's so true. Like we think that we can just ask any questions from our users, but we actually do need to do our own research. We need to know them even prior to like speaking with them, and doing some deeper reflections before yeah, before getting to know them further. So I like this.
And you see, and this so connects with like all the stuff we're going to be sharing in terms of different frameworks to basically help you understand the context of things you're working on. So I'm going to pass it to Amanda in a second here, but just as like a last thing here, for us, like a big thing is, the importance of both validating your problem. And I like what he said there, Olive, in terms of, you want to, talk to diverse users and be like, hey, is this actually an issue that's important, and understand like what their scenarios are, getting to root causes, right? Like, sometimes it may seem that like even the situation which we talked about just now around what is the issue with workshop attendance, and we talked about it could be that one of the causes might actually be around the fact that we are, especially in the summer, like people may want to be outside more, which is actually not a bad thing, and that's something we should actually encourage. And so like thinking about what are the root causes for whatever problem you're trying to identify, tweaking your solution accordingly. So as you dig deeper and you get into, maybe we're going to share a few different frameworks, and as you explore these different frameworks, tweaking your solutions as you understand the problem a little bit better, and then understanding the industry, competition, but also like other partners you could work with you. So like I get the word, like the words there are maybe more like on a businessy side, but on the if you're in a nonprofit world, there might be other nonprofits who are doing other work in that space. I mean, how do you complement the other work that's happening? How do you know what else is happening there? Thinking about, you might have funders who are going to help you in that space, and you also might have stakeholders. And sometimes they're not always the same. So, for instance, if you are working on a solution that is addressing homelessness, you might not charge the homeless people from business side, but rather what you might do is you might charge government agencies, right? And so the idea there of understanding all the different stakeholders that are involved, we touched on this in the value proposition workshop as well, and understand that your relationship with each and the problems that each of them might be dealing with are complex, and kind of understanding the whole thing. And look, figuring out what to do with all that can be a challenge, but more for us is like thinking about this intersectionality lens as you approach your different problems. And there too, like similar to what Olive and Amanda both said at the end, the importance of talking to different people, and that can, and when you have a better understanding of the actual problem, it allows you to build trust with different stakeholders. So I'm going to pass it off here to Amanda. And do you want to share, Amanda, about the Porter's 5 Forces model, as well as the SWOT analysis, which are also two really cool frameworks to really help you dig into what is the actual problem and the different factors I need to consider in terms of the context of the solution that I'm trying to develop.
Yeah. So with Porter and SWOT, it's mostly like trying to figure out if your solution is even valid, like, or needed, or if your problem even exists first. And then from there, you do a lot more market research. It kind of like helps you tailor your market research, you're surveying, you're interviewing to your customers, the end users, because you want to make sure you're actually able to sell something. We talked about this last week too, but like money is an actual, like it's needed for your solution to work. As sucky as it is, it's important to keep in mind. So yeah, you got to know if your customers are going to buy your product. Shitangshu, do you mind actually sharing your screen? Because when I do it on my iPad, it just like hides my face, and then I feel like I can't like talk.
No worries at all. Okay, I will do that here.
Thank you. It's just the Porter.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll present it here.
Thank you. Yeah, so have Olive or Swastik, have you ever heard of Porter's 5 Forces?
Can you repeat, like?
Have you ever seen this before, like Porter's 5 Forces analysis?
Yes, I have seen SWOT analysis. I have never gone through that much in this one. Okay,
that's fair. Cool. Yeah, SWOT is very common. I've also only had known about SWOT when I first started out my ventures, but this one has been very helpful to get to know just before you even conduct any research with your users. Olive, have you heard of it?
I haven't. Would this be more towards like the human aspect, or is it like more towards business?
This is more like competition. Like it tries to see how how set apart you are from everything else that already exists, or even new products that could come in, how you differentiate yourself, and like, is it actually viable in terms of like financing it eventually? So I can go into it a little bit. I won't take too much time because we'll do SWOT as well. But if you're interested, you can come to our market research workshop at 3, where we're going to dive a little bit deeper and like answer some questions about your own market research for your own innovations. So competitive rivalry. Can you still see me, by the way? Because my notes are covering half my screen. Yeah, Shitangshi, can you see me?
Well, I mean, the only thing is, like, I've minimized participants, so the opening screen. So I'm sure, I think people can see you. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I could see you before. It's good. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, because I use my hands a lot, and I feel like it helps.
Okay, cool. I can try and bring that up again, but okay. Here.
No, you're good.
I think you're good, my friend. Yes, we can see you.
Okay, so I'm going to use an example here of cars. Okay. So all of the 4 aspects here that are pointing towards competitive rivalry is because competitive rivalry is where you want to like see if you have high competition in your industry or not. And even if you do have high competition, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a place at the table. So for example, with cars, okay, let's say you're building a regular car into the market right now. Okay, you're going to be competing with a lot of folks who are already getting a lot of the shares of that market. Like there's so many cars out there, so many models. But let's say you go into this market with a line of like eco-friendly cars that are custom designed for your lifestyle, like your work lifestyle. Like, I don't know, maybe you would have less competition then in your niche now. So it's really just trying to see where you fit in with your idea. So up at the top, you have threat of new entrants. Okay. And this is essentially asking the question, how easy is it for people to get started in your industry on the problem that you're solving? So building a car, for example, is expensive. It's time consuming. It's dangerous. Sometimes, right, like you'd say that the threat of a new entrant is probably low. So someone coming after you is probably low because it's expensive. It's like not everyone has the resources that maybe you have, or other people have that have gone further than you. So meanwhile, like making chocolate is not as expensive. It's pretty easy. So the threat of someone new coming in to the field is probably higher. Yeah, does that make sense? I can't see anybody, so I'll have to like use my ears. Any questions on this one?
I'm gonna try and see if there's a way to put the panel of folks on the side, but yeah, it might be harder.
All good. You know what? Next time, because I haven't run a workshop with 2 people. Next time, I'm gonna sign into my laptop so we can kind of share on both screens. That might be helpful. Yeah. Okay, so I'll keep going. But stop me if there's any questions, or like if I'm going too fast. It is kind of complex to wrap your head around, like in the first.
I want to cover one. I want a question. Yes. So basically, please cover that part also. That let's say we are going in the car industry, and I think there is no idea left for in today's world that has not been explored. Let's say if you are saying EV cars has been explored from every part of the solution, right? So maybe sometimes VC or like anyone says what is new in your part. But I think, let's for example, Swiggy Zomato works for the same, but still they are a very good business. But VC is not ready to accept like there should be something new, but new is not right. So how we can convey them like we can start a business on the same page.
Yeah, newness is definitely like a value prop. Like when you have something new that no one's really seen, but it's in the same competitive field, it definitely does set you apart. But it is also scary for them. You're right. Like that's so valid. Because they don't know if new is going to work, right? Like a lot of VCs, like they are, I mean, it's their money, it's their like investment in you for longer than who knows when, right? So they're very keen on making sure, well, and that's why you need to do an analysis like this as well to show all kinds of aspects to it. So I'll keep going, and maybe this might help answer your question, because it can feel overwhelming when like you feel like there's just high competition and your newness is actually scary rather than hope giving to a VC. So here are some other ways maybe that we can kind of go into our analysis and show that we are different or it could work. Yeah, so do you mind if I continue here? I can't see anymore. Oh, thank you, Shtangshu. Okay, so I think on the bottom there, it says threat of substitution. If I can read that properly, it's just very small. The threat of substitution. So that you're asking yourself, how much can your product be substituted? So for cars, for example, you've got bikes, you've got buses, you've got Ubers, you've got different ways of getting around. So what can they do like that a car can offer, right? Can they do the same thing? Can they give you saving time, efficiency, autonomy? So potentially this threat of being substituted is low because everyone needs a car. Usually, like if your lifestyle is like the average person and you have kids, you have like that, is the substitution is low, the threat there. Later though, you might find that there are new products like high-speed bikes, maybe Ubers can become super highly affordable. So like it could be a substitution threat there. So that's how you kind of can look at substitution. Now, if on the left or right there, you have buyer power. So are you the seller in the driver's seat because you're selling luxury cars and you know that there are barely alternatives to what you offer? Then you're controlling that power. The buyer power is low. The person that you're selling to doesn't have as much power as you do. But is buyer power high because there's a trend on TikTok right now, maybe making people want the newest Tesla. So even if there are alternatives, that one is going to be bought the most. So then buyer power is high. You can't really control that as the seller of these luxury cars. And then you have supplier power. So this is a good example of what we saw during the pandemic when there was supplier demand, but we didn't have enough supply. So everyone was unable to get materials that they needed to build products like cars, for example, because the suppliers weren't able to travel and deliver. So this would mean that the supplier power was high. So you couldn't really do anything about it as the person innovating. You had to rely on your supplier. But if you're making a cake and you're selling cakes, for example, maybe you don't need the exact same eggs you use if there's a supply shortage. So you can outsource that, and that would mean you have low supplier power. So at the end of this research, you'll want to just make sure that there's more lows than highs. And even if there are more highs, you just need an action plan to tackle those highs. So like you said, Swastik, like what if the newness, is there, but it's kind of high on the threat of new entrants because for whatever reason, there could be more people coming up with newer ideas. So you just have to make sure you can tackle that. Like, okay, maybe you do it in a certain way, or maybe you sell it in a certain way that's different from your competition, or you offer like incentive that's different from your competition. Like you'll have to have an action plan to set yourself apart there. And industries always are changing. So you need to like stay up to date with what's going on. And so that's why market research is like essential for long-term success. Like you always need to have your market research as a priority throughout building, whether you're a day in or 10 years in. So yeah, that's a little bit on this, Porters. We're gonna stop here so that I can see if there's any questions.
Oh, for the competitive rivalry, like how would you determine if it's high or low? Like I saw that all of the arrows are kind of pointed towards it. I was just wondering what like the relationship is.
Yeah, so all four, essentially you have to see how much is low, how much is high. So the lower it is, the lower competition, the higher competition. So if your buyer supplier is high, your buyer power is high, your supplier power is high, your threat of new entrance is high, and substitution is high, like you'll have a harder time like proving that you have low competition. But that's when you can still innovate. Like you can still, now you're aware that there's so many things that you need to work on, and that's a start. Like you can just set yourself up to make them lower on each side. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah, great question. And yeah, the SWOT is similar as well. You'll see it. We'll go into it. Any other questions?
Right. So you have talked about the competitors. So basically, sometimes there are big competitors and very low competitors. So sometimes people don't know who are our competitors, like whom we are actually competing with. There are hundreds of companies, maybe emerging or maybe well settled. So what is your opinion? Like, do we consider the small competitors as well, or like a bigger industry or bigger players in the market?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the way that I've been able to kind of tackle that and like is asking your users what they already use for your problem. Like if they admit that there's a problem, okay, what do you already use out there? Like what works for you? Whether they name a small business or a bigger one, like a larger competitor, you can still go into it. You can still now research them because, well, your user is using it and that's your target. So yeah, going into like market research, you'll be able to survey, interview people and get more information on competition that way. Or yeah, just researching Google, blogs, like, and you know, people on social media, what they're using. Yeah.
If I can add one thing, is another thing to think about is sometimes the competition might not be directly, it might not always be like, think about, this is how I like to think about the competition sometimes. Right now, people, if they have a problem, usually find some way to deal with it. It might not be a good way, but they find some way to deal with it. So for instance, someone told me once, and I think the more I work in the startup field, it's so true, that the competitor for probably a good 60% of startups is a good Excel file. Because oftentimes Excel is a way to organize things. So for instance, what does LinkedIn do? LinkedIn helps you organize your contacts and like put all these, like basically creates this profiles of database of contacts. Earthnet does the same thing. And you could do that on Excel, right? You could, the way you could contact people is you have some contact information, you have all their like in database. Now you don't think of Excel as a competitor for LinkedIn, but nonetheless, that is oftentimes the way to do it, right? So right now, with any kind of project management software, Excel might be a competitor. So what's interesting there, you know, a competitor to using Microsoft Word might be people still write their notes on paper. So sometimes, you know, it's not always like, you have to think a bit broadly. If someone has a problem, for example, I need to write notes during class, how do they solve it? And that's maybe another way to think about it. Sometimes it's not directly that, they're creating a software solution or something that's like you. They're just solving it in a very different way, but they're still figuring out, usually people have problems, they figure out some way to address it. Maybe not the best way, and that's where, like, you know, going back to what Jordan said, is thinking about pains and gains, and you know what, you can find alternatives which can really reduce the pain of using whatever the current solution is. But yeah, so maybe that can also help a little bit to Swastika think about what those competitors are.
Yeah, I really like that. That's because like I can think about it in my own project, like knowing that educators are quitting is their solution, but that's not necessarily a good solution for our future generation. So trying to, I really like that. Any other questions?
So basically, this is the last question, because when we are doing analysis or maybe research, market research, people give wrong data because, for example, let's take your example. You are talking with the students, they are not actually giving the right data that we can help. Maybe they are giving the rough data, or maybe we are going to the market, or like we are doing surveys, they respond the wrong answer. I hope you are understanding what I'm saying. So how to tackle this situation, because we are considering those surveys for our databases and we are working, and when we launch the product or maybe something, those products are not that usable for the people because they actually don't need that. And so, like, how to tackle such issues during market research?
Yeah, sometimes you don't get the answers you're looking for from your users. But but that's still information that's still super valuable information. And it depends, like, do you mean like maybe they're not like giving you the effort and like attention to the survey? Because then with that, you can make sure that, you know, you write a question in the beginning saying, are you in a quiet space? Are you ready to, you know, respond to these survey questions in a headspace that's effective? Or is it because you're not getting like the answers that you need for your product that you have already? So even if you're not getting those answers, that just tells you need to pivot, right? Like you need to change it. You need to try to hear them out, and yeah, work for them. Essentially, you're working for your users. So it is hard. It's hard to be faced with those, like, you know, oh shoot, like our surveys aren't saying what we thought they needed. It's very discouraging at times as well. So, but having that mindset where, okay, we're always going to be pivoting, working towards what our users want is going to put you at the forefront of your competition. Like it'll set you apart, as hard as it is, because not everyone's willing to change what they initially started working on to meet the needs of their users, because it's hard. Yeah. Jiteng, should you have anything to add on that?
No, I think that's great. And I guess if there's no questions, I just like stopping screen sharing while we're asking questions just so that you can see each other. But okay, I'll show you continue screen sharing, or any other questions, folks?
Great questions, by the way.
Yeah,
I really like this
really
dialogue.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes. I'm so sorry. This was supposed to take like 10 minutes.
I think that's okay. Like if people have to drop it out early, that's cool. We're gonna have this on a recording as well. So like, you know, if you need to drop out early and check it out later. I think probably to finish all our content, we might go probably an extra 15, which I hope is okay. And that's all right, right? So if you drop off, then that's super cool, folks.
Okay, yeah, and SWOT, since both Olive and SWOT 6, you've already heard about this one, I won't go too far into it, but if you have questions, you want to work out an entire SWOT analysis with me, you can come at 3, and we can talk about it further, 3 Eastern time. So yeah, this is just another way.
Do still like a little bit of an intro for people who might watch this on video, just like maybe that is not super depth, at least some.
Yeah, for sure. So SWOT is exactly what it stands for. So it's like a little acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So when you're looking at your market research, you want to make sure you're either figuring out what kind of strengths you have that will propel you forward, and those are what will set you apart. Your weaknesses are the ones that are going to tell you what you need to work on, right? Like what you need to change, or sometimes it's okay to have a weakness even that you can't tackle, as long as you have some really good strengths or opportunities. Sometimes the weaknesses and threats won't really affect you as much, but that's why you need to do an analysis. Like you need to see what's really working and comparing it to other people as well. Like you have other competition that have weaknesses, you have other competition that have threats or opportunities. So really just like it really helps you kind of put yourself in the market somewhere, and you're always trying to get closer to, like, I like to think of it as like a target. So you're always trying to move your pin closer to the target by tackling either a weakness, working even further on a strength. Your opportunities are things like whether you have the connections or networks maybe you need, or there's a product that you have and there's a huge problem that just came out with like TikTok safety or whatever, some regulations around that, and your product solves things like this. And so there's an opportunity there that's going to work for you, that sets you apart from maybe a different company that specializes in something else. Or so really just like always tracking like what's going on in your market, what's going on in the field that you're trying to succeed in, really helps there with opportunities. And then your threats, things like competition, money, like low, maybe you don't have enough money to keep you like a runway for longer. Other threats, environmental threats, politics, things like that, you also need to be aware of. So I'll just leave it at that. I won't go too much further, but yeah, you can come ask questions at 3 to deep dive and yeah.
Amazing. Any questions, folks, for Amanda on the SWOT stuff?
Is it good to have
go ahead.
is it good is it good to have too much opportunities of our maybe of our solution? Because people say after giving like our solution is getting fit in, let's say in these type of sectors, or there are many sectors where our solution is fitting, but people say you are very confused because you are entering in so many sectors. So like, what is your opinion to have so much of opportunities, or like what you will say on
Yeah.
this topic?
Yeah, I like that so much. That's a really good question. With that, like there is such thing as too much opportunity, because you're gonna be spread thin. You're not gonna know which direction, and it's gonna put you in analysis paralysis. Like you won't be able to move forward if you're doing too much too soon. So with our like project, for example, in the beginning, we had so many ideas, we had so much we wanted to do. It was overwhelming. Like our like buyers, like they didn't know what exactly we were specializing in, because we wanted to do it all. So like really narrowing down what you offer to like 3 main pillars, and showing that you have them all down, that narrows down your opportunities as well, and helps you choose faster. So the thing that sets you apart in innovation is how fast you can go and how fast you can fail. Like when you're failing fast with those opportunities that, like, you're taking them out, it helps you figure out which way to go next, and that's kind of what you act on. Does that make sense?
Yes, so basically you are saying like filtering out the opportunities, and looking for the one looking for like listing out like which will work for us.
Yeah, and the other pillars, like, sorry, the other segments of SWOT also help you figure out opportunities. So if you have strengths and weaknesses and threats that like can influence an opportunity, that's what you act on. That's why it's important to do a lot of this consistently too.
I'm gonna just add there, there's value there in also kind of ranking each of these things, and in particular, opportunity is a good one, because I think that to write down that this is an opportunity is one thing. To action on it and to like change the direction of your company because it was an opportunity is another. So I think one thing that SWOT is helpful for is, as you have these different ideas that come down, write them down somewhere. Like even for the Youth Impact Challenge, we have a document, and it's basically called Ideas that we may get one day, right? And so as we launch our summer competition, we want to do a review of those ideas as we launch this new thing. But what's interesting is we were like, just write down the ideas. There's all these opportunities that you might identify, but it does not mean that you're going to put your resources into pursuing those opportunities necessarily. So there might be, of those 5 opportunities, you're pursuing 1 or 2 of them. The more focused you are, the better often. Like you really want to focus. And like focus on something, fail, and then focus on the next thing, and maybe pivot quickly, right? So there, I would say, write down the opportunities, rank them, but maybe understand that if you try and pursue every opportunity, you're in trouble. If you try and but the fact that there are opportunities means that as you expand, as you succeed in something, maybe you understand what your next thing might be, or as you fail, you might know that, hey, that failed, but there was this other opportunity which we didn't really pursue. Let's try that for a bit, right? So write them down somewhere. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to do something with it. That's part of the reason why we do these frameworks is, so just give you an idea of figuring out where you could go, kind of figuring, all this is to help you figure out your direction.
Yeah, that's a great insight there too. Cool. If there's no other questions, Shitangshu, I can hand it off to you.
So I'll share a little bit about system thinking, folks, and I want to like really something I want to like really make clear to start things off here. This is like there's so much with really all of this stuff. There's books written on every one of these, and what we're sharing with you is really the very high level of some of these concepts. I really encourage folks to check out the workshop later, where you're gonna have a chance to get a deep dive into using some of these frameworks in practice, especially in the context of specifically market research. And I think there's that's going to be really exciting workshop, which Amanda will be leading later this afternoon. But like, yeah, this is very much a high level introduction to concepts. And also, like, I recognize that sometimes, I know when I went to my business school, I got a sense of framework fatigue, where I've been introducing to a bunch of stuff, but there's so many different ways to think about the world, and you need to sometimes figure out what's the one which makes sense to me and which I feel like I can action on. I want to share about the systems thinking framework, which is like a more recent learning for me, but it's one which has impacted my thinking a bit, but it's also one that's sometimes harder to get your mind around. And at the core of it is the idea that instead of thinking things in a linear way, recognize that the reality of the world is that like we are often operating in a much more interconnected way, right? So event-oriented thinking, which is oftentimes how people talk, is the idea of, you know what, there's some causal chain, there's A created B, created C, created D, right? That's kind of like how you think about it. But the reality is, oftentimes, especially when you do environmental work or really any kind of work in the social environmental impact space, you know, there's multiple factors which created B. There's multiple factors which created C. And actually, once C happens, it's going to impact A in some way and B in some way and D in some way. So it's not like these one-to-one relationships. There's like many-to-many relationships. So the idea of systems thinking is that oftentimes the behavior of things emerge from the structure of all these interconnected parts, and root causes are not just like one thing. There's oftentimes a more complex story behind it. And so like an example of this is even looking at our economic systems. You know, we have economic systems nowadays which really incentivize growth. But oftentimes when you look into the root causes of that, there's multiple things that explain why the economic system is here in the first place, from the story of certainly colonialism and everything that happened there, from a story as well of the attempt of humanity to eradicate poverty. The amount of, you know, something to reflect on is there has been a noticeable increase in many standards of well-being and all that kind of stuff, right? And then there's also a story of you know, various value systems and philosophers who came in and shared different concepts, and it's a complex story, and you start to realize it's not even like the system itself operates in a particular way. Sometimes there's these negative effects, but to understand how you deal with it, you really need to understand this broader context of how everything connects. There's an exercise I've encouraged you folks to do, and it's around this concept of system mapping. So when you have a problem you want to deal with, you know, think about all the different kind of connections around that problem. So for instance, you know, if you look at the climate refugee crisis, you know, you might want to look at what is the history of how refugees came into there in the first place. That's going to connect with the history of human rights. That's going to connect with World War II. The World War II connects with a whole bunch of different factors, and it connects with World War I and the Great Depression and impacts from that, and there's so many different things, right? Now it can get very overwhelming, but like taking some time to think about those connections is valuable. In systems theory work, you also see the word nodes, and at the core of it, the idea of a node is it's like a specific like it might be a thing that happened, or it's you know, a specific impact that was made. But again, each of those things are connected to so many other circumstances that are important to reflect on. I want to share as well at a very high level again, and these are things that there's books written on. I'm going to encourage folks to look at the work of Donella Meadows. So I might type that in the chat here. So Donella Meadows is just like a really incredible author here. Sadly, she passed away recently. She wrote a whole bunch of stuff on systems thinking, especially in environmental space. She has a great book as well called Limits to Growth, which looked and critiqued the capitalist system around the fact that, you know, we have nature which works in cycles, and, you know, we're trying to create these like it tries to create equilibrium, and then we have economic systems which are all about grow. You know, even something like the venture capital space, you know, it's predicated on we need to see constant growth in order for success to happen. If the economy isn't growing, it's seen as stagnating. If the growth is, we often don't aim for stable economies where things are rather we're aiming for constantly growing economies. And so she gave a critique on that, looking at especially the relationship between environmental systems and kind of these economic systems that we've developed. One of the concepts that she brings in is this idea of feedback loops. A note, by the way, there's also a lecture series on YouTube if you search her name, where she goes into a lot of this stuff, and it's just really fascinating stuff. I was chatting with our mentor yesterday, Subin, who works for a company called System Make, and they are systems change consultant. They do systems change consultancy work, and there's some really incredible resources. I encourage folks to check out that lecture series as well if you search the Noah Meadows. In any case, and one of the concepts she introduces is the idea of feedback loops. And I think this is very valuable to think about, especially in the environmental space, and also how your solution might fit. And what the idea with feedback loops is, as you have actions, there's things that happen. There's ripple effects, some that you predict and some that you might not predict. And oftentimes there's a question of how kind of the actions and the effects feedback with each other. She makes distinctions between a balancing feedback loop and a reinforcing feedback loop. And what a balancing feedback loop is that, if you look at how nature works, oftentimes, a change might happen, but then it kind of corrects itself, and then the change happens again. If you look at the seasons in Canada, for instance, you have a time in spring right now where things are blooming, things have bloomed in summer, leaves fall. They kind of decompose, and then in the winter time they fall off, and there's this, and then that soil is now the nutrients for the next generation of leaves, right? So the sense of there in nature, you see all these cycles, and you see cycles and so many different kinds of cycles. You might have heard of the water cycle. These there's the air cycle. There's just so many different cycles where things are often trying to find stability and self-correct. Thermostat's another great example. So if you have a thermostat in your home, you might turn your heat up to a certain temperature, and it's going to it's kind of allowed to warm a little bit. It's going to kind of correct itself and stop heating for a bit to get the temperature down. It's going to heat again, right? So the idea that there's always this kind of feedback where an action creates an effect, and that the effect influences the other action. The idea is you're finding this balance. With reinforcing feedback loops, they tend to lead to instability. Now, instability is not always a bad thing. It's important to remember. So for instance, an example of a reinforcing feedback loop is when you look at the human rights movement and the fact that, there's even you take something like, from the abolition of slavery, you had the civil rights movement and folks starting to realize that, hey, if we are equal, we need to, it's not enough that we're just equal in law. We need to be equal in practice. And so, you see the civil rights era happening, and you see the Black Lives Matter movement happening, where you realize in law enforcement, there's all these issues. And so that's an example of a reinforcing feedback loop where an action creates an effect, but the effect amplified the action amplified the effect, and you see bigger and bigger things growing. And that's an example of a very positive feedback loop where yes, there was instability, but instability wasn't a bad thing because we actually needed the system to kind of break. We needed that system where people weren't equal to actually break so that we can eventually get ourselves to a point of stability later where people are a stable ecosystem where people are actually treated as equals. And so that's an example of a positive example of a reinforcing feedback loop. A negative example would be, again, some of our economic systems where, we want to grow, but then growing means that you're growing, that you need to invest even more resources to grow further, and then you need to invest even more resources to grow further. Population growth is a really good example as well, where, as the population grows, the demand on what the environment needs grows further, but then that creates even more population growth, and that creates even more demand on the environment. And then there's this kind of constant kind of feedback, which can be less desirable. So again, balancing and reinforcing feedback loops are both important. It's not saying that one is better than the other. One idea is that some systems are trying to self-correct, and oftentimes in nature we see that. And then there's there's also reinforcing feedback loops, some of which are needed. Like for instance, in the EarthNet space, we talk about we need to accelerate climate action. We can't just be okay with the status quo and everything just kind of staying as is. We need accelerated climate action where we want hundreds and thousands of projects out there that are all making an impact in different ways. And that means that if one project inspires, two projects inspires, four projects inspires, 8 projects, etc. Like we need that level of growth, especially if you want to achieve some of the climate goals that we need to achieve. And so again, both of these have a place to play, but here it's valuable for you to think about your solution. How does it maybe help accelerate positive change? Could it maybe accelerate negative change? And that's important to think about as well. How does it maybe help to create stability if that stability is a desirable thing, or maybe it could actually contribute to reinforcing current systems that need to be challenged? So a lot of things to think about there, folks. I know that that's like just a ton of information. I'll just give one example here as well, very specific to climate change, and then I'll allow for some questions. So in the climate change space, you can think of, if you do mitigation actions to reduce carbon dioxide, then there's a real opportunity there that if you give enough time, Earth can repair itself, and actually we can stabilize our temperatures to go back to what it was, in pre-industrial levels. But you really need to kind of get into that point of carbon neutrality, and maybe even getting to the point where there's like negative carbon emissions and stuff, right? But so that's where there's a possibility for, with the right mitigation actions, to stabilize temperatures. But then what's happening right now is, there's so many actions which just reinforce and increase temperatures. So for instance, we pump more carbon dioxide into the air. That increases temperatures. That creates forest fires, which reduces, kills trees, plus gets smoke in the air, which creates more carbon dioxide, and that just reinforces. Another great example that they have here is the idea of ice. As ice melts, there's less, a lot of important heat is reflected from ice. So the sea ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic play an important role in reflecting heat because of the white color. And so as that ice melts, there's less white area in the world, there's less heat being reflected in the world, and that means that there's more absorption of solar radiation into the Earth, and then that increases temperatures. And so we have, again, a reinforcing feedback loop on the other side. So every node in that systems map will have both balancing and reinforcing feedback loops impacting it. And I feel that sometimes all this information is really overwhelming, but at the core of it, the core lesson for today is think about those different factors which are going to impact your innovation. Think about the different ways that those 5 forces it will impact and maybe change how you adapt. Think about those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Think about how, what you're going to do is going to create ripple effects, and how there's so many things that impact your problem. And sometimes the root cause of your problem is actually a much more complex story than just saying that, hey, this is what the problem is. So that's kind of the core lesson of today, is to really embody that intersectionality lens. I know that's a lot of information, folks. So I'll pause here. I'll stop the video as well, and I'll ask questions from the participants who are here. I hope that is a bit of learning and you've gained something from our workshop here. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop recording. Bye.